No wonder everybody gets in the taxi. Crikey. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't care how far away this hospital is.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Didn't cost $1,000.
You know what? I'll walk there.
Yeah.
Just
Okay.
let me
Honestly.
tie something around this bullet hole, and I'll just limp on over. I'll see you in a couple of hours. Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Very Special Relationship, the show that looks at the wide array of corrupt politicians in the UK and the US and dissects them with the help of terrible accents. I'm your host, Andrea Bridges-Smith, over on the US side, and joining me from the UK is Matt Johnston. Matt, what is happening in your neck of the geopolitical woods?
Not too much over here, Andrew. I have to say, I did see that Donald Trump met our future king, William.
Ah,
I believe it was over in France, right? The opening
uh-huh.
of Notre Dame. Apparently, Trump was there to ring the bells. So, what a meeting of minds that must have been. You got one who's been overthrown by democracy, and the other hoping to go in the opposite direction. But all the news I know over there and here to a lesser extent are relating to the murder of a healthcare CEO. Andrea, can you give us basically a breakdown of what happened for those that aren't, basically been lying under a rock, shall we say? And the latest is, please.
Sure. Yeah, this one has been an absolutely wild ride. So last week, the CEO of one of our biggest insurance corporations, United Healthcare, was assassinated by a gunman. And the surprising thing about this was the reaction on social media, which was basically to throw a ticker tape parade. You have never seen so many people happy about a murder. It was a bit much. But it turns out that this CEO presided over a pretty bad health insurance company that denies more claims than all the other major insurers. So about a third of claims. So basically, for every
Wow.
3 sick people who come to them for help, they tell one of them to fuck off. And they even built an AI tool to try and deny claims faster. So this is the company that this guy was in charge of. So as shocking as the murder was and the subsequent social media reaction, because you're like, wow, this seems really harsh. But then you sort of learn a little bit more and you're like, yeah, I kind of get why people are feeling that way, you know?
Yeah. It does all seem rather strange, doesn't it? And it's given so many people that opportunity to say things like, I'm not advocating murder, but,
Uh-huh.
and I know because I'm just about to do the same sort of thing. So let me start by saying murder is wrong, definitely,
Sure.
obviously. But
Yes.
so is making insane and unnecessary profits of others' misery and pain.
Completely agree with you. And just to cover our bases, I want everyone to know Matt and I are against drowning puppies, but also we think maybe billionaires should give away more money to poor people. I think that's how we do. Is that, Matt, does that sound like, is that
That
right?
does sound about right. Yes. Okay. So, Andrea, I thought we would take this. In fact, it was you that suggested it, that we take this, have a look at your healthcare service and obviously ours, which is essentially the National Health Service.
Right.
Now, the National Health Service, I mean, it's not perfect, but by God, when we look across the pond at the alternative, it generally makes my blood run cold, which thankfully I can go and see a GP about without a cough.
I was very curious about this as this story was unfolding. I kept
Right.
thinking about you over there and your healthcare system versus ours. And, I was trying to imagine, like, if someone assassinated the head of the NHS, I would imagine that there would be a very different reaction in your country. There would probably be less confetti, for example.
Yeah, it would certainly, yeah, it'd certainly be a lot more shock, shall we say?
Yes.
And absolutely, let's grab this killer before he kills somebody else. I
Sure.
suspect most people won't even know, but the head of the NHS, most people even in this country won't actually know, but the head of the NHS and CEO of NHS England is a lady called Amanda Pritchard. But it could be said, as it's publicly funded, that the NHS belongs to the British people.
Right.
Now, not everything is free on the NHS. For instance, prescriptions aren't, but they are reasonably costed. And a reason for that, and all the medicines available, is because the NHS buys essentially for the country, and as such is able to drive the price down. Now, if a small country like the UK can do this, can you just imagine what effect the US will be able to have?
Well, that's an excellent point. And I will say that the Biden administration did manage to drive down the cost of certain common medications that were way too expensive, like insulin, for example. But we need a lot more of that to
Really.
take place. There's just no reason why the same drug should cost 20 times more in the States than it does in Britain. I mean, cocaine should be cheap everywhere because I'm trying to throw a party, damn it.
Yeah. By the bathtub, by the bathtub. Or the app that I'm thinking of. All right. So now the NHS is almost universally loved over here. So much so, I remember one time, I think it was Donald Trump said that a lot of people hated the NHS. That's how much it's loved over here.
It's a
One of
good
the reasons,
barometer.
one of the reasons that they reckoned Brexit passed was because Boris Johnson and his entourage had a double-decker bus driven around the country with the message that we send the EU £350 million a week. Let's fund the NHS instead. And a lot of people voted Brexit to get the NHS that extra funding. But of course, with anything involving Boris Johnson, you've got to read the small print. So the message didn't say, let's fund the NHS with a 350 million. It just said, let's fund the NHS with, well, whatever. And of course, they didn't fund the NHS with 350 million.
No, but it's that small print, you got to read it because the word Rwanda might make an appearance somewhere in there. So, you got to be careful.
Especially when it comes to Johnson, absolutely. Now,
Yes.
I did say that it's almost universally loved over here, but there is one notable exception when it comes to the admiration of the organisation that basically saves people's lives. That is the right-wing press, who have seemed to have gone out of their way to talk down doctors and nurses and all those, woke goody two-shoes. I suspect a lot of that has to do with a certain current MP and party leader who has made no secret of the fact that he'd like to see the NHS replaced with an insurance-based system. Can you guess the current MP and party leader, Andrea?
I mean, my first guess is Nigel Farage over at Reform, but he should really be careful making fun of doctors in case he ever decides to have a surgery to fix what's wrong with his face.
Yeah, or indeed, if he needs to get his tongue out of Trump's arse. Also, by the way, yes, he has gone on record saying that an insurance-based system is the way to go. And what do people get for their money? Anyway, of course, as many Brits will no doubt point out, it isn't free. It's paid for out of taxes to the government. But because of that, you never see it.
Well, I mean, we can always count on Nigel Farage for a well-reasoned argument. So getting back to this shooting incident, the shooter was finally caught at a McDonald's this week, and the internet was so furious about this that they gave a bunch of one-star reviews to the McDonald's where the tip was called in, complaining about rats and snitches. They were saying there's a rat infestation at that McDonald's, and who's giving 5-star reviews to a McDonald's anyway? But I digress.
Yeah.
Amazon.
You don't read the reviews for going to McDonald's, do you? Let's be honest.
Exactly. You're like, I don't know, 4.2 maybe. It's like, nah, you don't care about, reviews or health or anything if you're going to McDonald's.
Ironically,
Now,
yes.
yes, Amazon had to take down some merchandise that had the same words that were etched on the bullets that were used in the killing. So I don't know if you heard about that detail, Matt.
No.
So there is I think it's a healthcare documentary or a book or something that's called like Deny, Delay, and some other D word. But it's basically something that's critical of the healthcare industry. And so the shooter etched these words on the bullets
Wow.
before shooting, which, I mean, that's very premeditated. You got to really
That's
want to shoot
commitment.
somebody
Yes,
if you're
absolutely.
autographing the ammo. So some of the merchandise on Amazon was featuring those words, and so Amazon had to step in and take those down. And then there is an online fundraiser for the shooter that's raised about $16,000 for his legal fees so far. And the very ironic part about that is that online fundraisers are kind of a key part of our healthcare system because, people use them to raise money for surgeries and things.
Wow. Really? I mean, people fundraise for their healthcare?
Yes. So there's a platform here called GoFundMe. I don't know if you have it over there too.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, people very commonly raise funds on there so that they can, pay for their health care and get surgeries and things like that. In fact, I read a statistic that 1/3 of the money raised on GoFundMe is for medical purposes. So,
Wow.
not a very caring healthcare system when you think about it.
No, not at all. Can I very quickly go back to the shooter?
Yes.
There, somebody mentioned, and I think it was when the news first came out. They said he thought it might have been like a targeted assassination. Like a rival. I don't know how to put it. Like a professional hit job, essentially.
Right.
So, is it like that, or is it just some bloke, a random, a lone gunman, as it were, just some bloke with a gun? Was he acting on his
It's
own?
it seems like so far he is acting on his own. Now the thing with this sort of crime is that, you can get copycats. So
Yeah.
that's made everybody a bit nervous that works in the health insurance industry. But so far it seems like he was working alone. In the beginning, they were like, yeah, this does seem like a trained assassin because
Yeah.
he, had like a silencer and, was very like hitman type technique here. But it turns out it's just this like young guy. I don't think he was ever in the military or anything like that. So
Well,
yeah, it's really strange.
as you say, committed. So anyway, I saw a stat today on Twitter. You got to believe whatever's on Twitter, right? But this one blows my mind. It says that approximately 68,000 Americans die each year because of not being able to access healthcare, which is over twice as many as lose their lives because of guns, which is a figure you gave me, Andrea, and was at the time the most shocking statistic I had about Americans losing their lives in America.
Yeah, shocking is an excellent word to describe our healthcare system. So let me ask you this. If you were out somewhere and someone fainted and they fell down and they hit their head, would you call an ambulance right away?
Yeah, yeah, no doubt, especially if they look like, if I saw blood or something like that and they said, "Oh, I'm feeling really very," I'd be like, "No, you stay there and, we'll get an ambulance to you." In fact, that did happen to me, not to me, but to, I was walking past this old lady was coming the other way and she sort of like collapsed and stuff. And that's exactly what I did. Yes.
Yeah. Well, over here, an ambulance ride to the hospital can be really expensive. So if someone fainted over here, there might be several things that you would do before calling an ambulance. So you might first try to wake them up and then
Well,
ask if they're okay with you calling an ambulance. You
yeah.
might see if there's a doctor or nurse nearby that can say, do we really need to call an ambulance? Or, could maybe somebody just drive them to get checked out, something like that. It, Calling an ambulance might not necessarily be your first step because of the expense. I mean, unless, somebody had like got shot or something like that, then you would. But,
Yes.
if it was something maybe a little bit less urgent, then that wouldn't be the first thing that you would do.
By the way, it's very clear what we're doing here, viewer. It is, we are sort of, if it seems like we're lambasting the American healthcare system, I'll be honest, that's essentially what the vast majority, if not all, of this particular podcast again is going to be about. But it is worth mentioning, as I say, if twice the amount of people lose their lives to affordable healthcare than lose their lives to guns, and that's a big deal, And never mind the fact that this guy's in the news for shooting the CEO of a healthcare company. Anyway, I beg your pardon, Andrea. Please continue.
Well, that's kind of the nice thing about that story is it
Mm,
really brings together both of those things, the gun
mm.
violence and the lack of healthcare, just knits them right together into a blanket
Yeah.
of dystopia. Now, there's, everybody at these other healthcare companies, they've been scrambling a little bit. So anybody who is an executive at a healthcare company is suddenly, dark glasses, fake mustache, like just
Just a
hoodie.
silhouette like that.
Nope, nothing to see here.
Yeah.
So a lot of them have changed their websites to remove all mention of who's on the executive teams. So if you try to go and like look at the, the who's running the show section of the website,
Mm.
404 page now, they've all like beefed up their security. But so far, there's only one of them who has had the thought of like, what if we acted in ways that don't make people want to shoot at us? But they did need a little bit of a nudge. So there was this one health insurance company that they said they would only cover a certain amount of anesthesia during a procedure. So they're like, anesthesiologists, it's getting out of hand. You need to get in there, wrap it up, and that's you're charging us too much for anesthesia. And so let's say that you're having a surgery and then there was a complication and it took some extra time to fix. Your choices are once you wake up, you've got to write a huge check to cover the extra cost of the anesthesia because it's also very expensive. Or they can wake you up mid-operation and say, so sorry, sleepy time is over. Here, bite down on this while we finish closing you up.
Wow.
And everybody on social media, right after this shooting, this article came out at like the same time, and everybody was like, "Are you sure you want to do that?"
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that company was like, "You know what? Now that you mention it, our CEO's head does look a lot better without a hole in it. So we're going to do you a solid and let you have as much anesthesia as you need. You're welcome."
Wow. Well, I mean, and I know we're joking. Had there been an occasion where somebody's woken up because they didn't get enough anesthetic?
Yes. I'm not sure if it's necessarily because of the cost. Usually, I think it's usually
Mm.
because of a complication. I don't think that anybody actually would stop anesthesia mid procedure and be like, "Oh, we ran out of time. The insurance company won't cover." I think it would just be like, "Well, you woke up like, you did well. Everything's fine. Bad news. So
Yeah.
this poor
You may
person is
feel
trying
a
to
slight
recover."
discomfort.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, exactly. So yes, it's like great news is you're all sewn up. Bad news is that the fun is only beginning because you're going to get a call from the insurance company about this in a little while. So
Mm.
rest up. You're going to need it.
I have to say, I've got to feel sorry for the American doctors and nurses and, the other healthcare providers. I mean, who know that they can cure and treat people, but instead have to see if they've got insurance or not. After all, shouldn't that be what doctors do? Treat people rather than check their insurance. I know it sounds rather obvious.
Well, they do go to medical school to learn how to do medical stuff,
Mm.
and they don't go to insurance school. So that's one clue maybe. And actually, doctors and nurses are some of the biggest proponents of switching to a single payer healthcare system that would look a lot more like the NHS. The insurance companies really they exist to make it harder to get healthcare while collecting billions of dollars off of people's sickness, and it's unnecessary.
Mm.
And sometimes they even make things harder to their own detriment. So, for example, if I want to see a dermatologist, let's say I have a rash or something, I have to go to my regular doctor first to get a referral to the dermatologist. So I'm having to take time out of my busy schedule to go to two different doctor's appointments and negotiate with the insurance company. But also, it's worse for them too, because they're having to pay for, the two doctor's visits. They're having to do twice the amount of paperwork instead of just
Yes.
letting me go to the dermatologist. It's like if a waiter dumped half of your soup on his own head before throwing the rest in your lap, Now we're both covered in dumpling broth. Who won here?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Quite. Quite. I do have to say there is. I mean, when I had a medical procedure done a few years ago, in fact, and I was sent to a few different places, but it's only to check who the specialist is, to say,
Mhm.
oh, you need to go here because of this. It's this person that will be able to treat you, that sort of thing. So there we go. Yeah.
Right. And that makes sense when it's like, okay,
Mm.
let me start with my regular doctor and they'll say, okay, you need to go here next. But yeah, when it's like, no, I know which doctor to go to. It's the skin doctor. It's a skin thing. I know
Mm.
that's where I'm going to end up. And it's just frustrating to not be able to go straight there and be like, okay, I know you're
Yeah.
not the person for this, but here we are together, wasting both of our time. You could be seeing a sick person that actually needs you, but instead we're doing this. It's not a good system. So I'm curious, Matt, if the NHS ever does these kind of like bizarre cost cutting measures, because I know that it's been underfunded lately.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've had a conservative government lately. Wow. It's almost like the two things were connected. Um, the cost cutting tends to come from the government. The doctors and nurses and hospitals and whoever will fix whatever's wrong with you. It's genuinely something we don't even think about over here. It really isn't. It's just like, oh, I've got to go. I was speaking to somebody. I was doing a show here, and there's a lady from South Africa doing a show with us. and she was saying she got a bad back and stuff like that. I said, you should go along to the hospital. She goes, I don't know. I said, that's fine. She goes, what do I do? Do I go in? Do I sign in? Do I have to have the money? I said, no, you just go in and they'll see you. And that was it.
It's such a foreign concept to us. Like, I'm jealous of it, truly. I would love to think less about how to get the healthcare and just go get the healthcare, Like,
Yeah.
it sounds like a much better system. What would you say is like the worst thing about the NHS? I know there's a lot of good things about it, but
Mm.
what's the worst thing? Because, over here, Republican politicians in particular tell a lot of stories about how, oh, there's long waits to get healthcare. So we really do have a better system, as if we don't have long waits over here. But anyway, is that like the worst part of it, is the long waits?
I mean, it has been for the last 14 years or so. Spoiler alert, the Conservatives have been in power for the last 14 years. I'll give you some idea how much the Tories have starved it of funds. There were waiting lists that really they should have been sent to jail for, in all honesty. When the last Labour government left in 2010, the wait list had been reduced to 2.3 million. When the Tories left in July, it was over 7 million.
Wow. Now, obviously not a mathematician, but that seems a lot worse, right?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I mean, the Labour government has invested another £20 billion in it since they've been in power, with the express target of reducing waiting times. And I noticed something rather interesting, that 21% of people in the UK wait more than a day to get access to some sort of healthcare, while 28% of Americans do likewise.
Right.
Although only 27% of Americans wait for more than a month to see a specialist, while 2% of Brits do likewise. And shall we just skate over the fact that there are over 2.5 million Americans who currently have no medical insurance whatsoever? Sorry, all of this does seem like yank bashing. I apologise profusely.
No, if there is anything that you can bash us for, it's this. It's dumb. It's stupid. It doesn't make any sense. You could also, take a shot at our overly large military. But I don't recommend doing that. That doesn't usually end well with people.
No,
At
we
least
won't
we
take on
may,
your military. Definitely not. Definitely
yeah.
not.
But yeah, we may not have competent healthcare, but we do have bombs. So, and I think that makes all of us feel so much better. Um, I'm curious if over there it's even possible for somebody to lose their house because they can't pay their medical bills. Is that a thing that could that ever happen?
No, but just to be sure, I actually Googled it. It's such a strange one. And basically, anyone in this country is all given the same free access to healthcare. In fact, private medical insurance only covers non-urgent cases. If you have a heart attack or any other life-threatening condition, you will have to be covered by the NHS. A couple of
Mm.
years ago, as I say, I had an infection. It was actually an infection under my fingernail. Now, I went to St. Thomas's in London, and it was the same hospital that treated Boris Johnson when he got severe COVID and nearly lost his life. I guess in that regard, we're just dirty socialists, as your soon-to-be president would say.
I I think the dirty socialism actually sounds pretty nice. The dirtier the better, honestly. Obviously, we won't be getting any of that in the next 4 years, but
Yeah.
it does sound nice. I'm curious how much like if you go to a hospital and they give you a Band-Aid, um, how much does that cost? Because over here, the hospital will charge you like $10 for a Band-Aid, and then you have to call them up and be like, we both know that they don't cost that much. Don't do that. And they'll be like, all right, fine. We'll charge you the reasonable amount but first they'll send you an invoice and they'll be like, pay this, please. And then you'll be like, nice try. Send me the itemized invoice. And then they send you a list of like line by line what they're charging you for, which is where you find out about, the Band-Aid being $10 instead of, 20 cents or whatever. And then you have to call and be like, all right, let's both make a cup of tea, settle in. We're going to be here for a while. Let's start with line
Really?
one. What the hell is
Wow.
this? And that's what you have to do over here.
When you say like a bandage, is it like them applying the Band-Aid, like a sticking plaster?
Yes, yes.
Right. So, yeah, again, they wouldn't charge you anything over here. I mean, zero, zilch, nada, nothing. They'd apply it and then you'd be on your way, basically. I had a cut this morning. I was basically doing lots of sort of heavy lifting and stuff today. I've got to cut across my thing. So I'll put a plaster on myself. So that I would pay for. But if you went to a hospital, and in fact, I think, sorry for laughing, I think they would probably end up going, "You taking a piss?" You go, "There you go. That'll be a tenner, thank you." You're like, "You what? It's just stuck a bandage on. Relax." Yeah. People go, "Where do you think you're going, Buster? Come on, pay up, or you take the bandage off." So I've got to ask as well: is that how it works? If you break your leg and they mend it and you don't pay, do they break your leg again?
I'm kind of surprised that they don't at this point. And honestly, I think people might prefer that to being hounded by bill collectors and having their car repossessed and, things like that.
So, so it's not just the fact that you've got this bill from the insurance. If you don't pay it, sorry, bill for the healthcare. If you
Yeah.
don't pay it, they send collectors around, do they?
Yes. Yes.
I mean, there's that skit from Monty Python where a chap, was it Meaning of Life? I think it was. A chap's got a kidney donor card and two surgeons just come around and take it out of him because, well, they need the kidneys. I imagine it's a bit like that.
Yes, yes, but less compassionate somehow.
Another thing I'm a bit confused about is that taxpayers pay for the fire services, right? Even
Right.
though your house isn't on fire, you pay for a police force, army, schools, etc. Even if you don't need those things either right away or then sometimes ever. So why the big fuss about all contributing to a public healthcare system? It's not like you can't afford it. I mean, as a country, of course.
Well, and we also pay for the stockpiling of nuclear weapons, and we'd really like to not ever use those. It's an excellent point. We are okay paying for all of that stuff. Roads, schools,
Hmm.
police, all of that is fine. But we bristle at the thought of Nana's heart surgery being affordable. Well, I should say lawmakers do, and that's probably because they get a lot of donations from insurance companies. I think the rest of the country, all of the people are absolutely ready for a massive change to our healthcare system.
Yeah.
And I think that's what this incident has shown is that's why everyone's been cheering on this murderer on social
Mm.
media. It's a very extreme consequence of a very extreme system,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah. You could put it another way. If somebody had started a war in which thousands of people had died and you'd managed to sort of, and I know this is coming back to that we're not advocating murder
Sure,
stance, but
sure.
yeah, it's kind of an unclear way to go. So, okay. If it's okay with you, I'd like to talk through, and I think we've talked through enough of this, but
Hmm.
I think just to be clear for anybody out there, either not from the US or not from the UK or never been to a UK hospital, if I was to go into, I need a process. Let's say I've got a gash on my hand, right?
Hmm.
It's bleeding quite badly. I go into a UK hospital. They will not only see me, they'll see me straight away because they actually based it on the priority of how sick you are, etc., how badly, what you've got.
Right.
And again, it happened with the nail because they were unclear of exactly how bad it was because they couldn't see the whole nail. Anyway, so you go in, they kind of, you might sit down, then you get taken with a nurse into the thing. They, do you up, they sew you up or whatever. I'm trying to remember if there's even any paperwork to sort of sign. No, there is. There is.
No.
And you've got to sign it beforehand. And this is the most frightening part of it, actually, not the bill, is the fact that the paperwork they made me sign for my infection under a fingernail would say the patient, the bloke just said, just sign here, 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 and then went off to, wash his hands or whatever. And I went to sign and I read it because I thought I don't like to sign anything without reading it. And I read it and it said, the patient has been made aware that they may, as a result of this procedure, die of a heart attack. And I was like, I was never made
Whoa!
aware of that. What?
Surprise!
Yeah. And I brought it up with the bloke when he came back, and he was like, "Oh no, you're not going to die of a heart. Don't be ridiculous. It's something we've got to put in there bizarrely for insurance,
Do they have to
There we go." And I
were they
thought,
going to fix your hand with a defibrillator? Like, how does this work?
yeah, yeah,
Going
clear
to
that.
shock the skin into knitting itself back together? I don't understand.
Watch this guy fly across the room. Um, So that's the way that things are in here. But let's imagine me, I've got this gash in my hand, I'm bleeding rather badly. I
Yeah.
go into an American hospital. Can you talk us through that, what essentially will happen?
Yes. So you're going to go to an emergency room and say, I have this. And then they're going to say, okay, fill out all this paperwork and, do you have insurance? And if not, they're going to be like, "Ooh, this is about to be expensive for you, just so you know." And you'd be like, "All right, how bad could it be?" And you go to the waiting room, and if you're lucky, you'll be seen in a reasonable amount of time, but it depends on, which hospital you're in and which
Hmm.
area and things like that. Then you'll go back and they'll do what they need to do. You will get a good doctor doing a good procedure. I don't think that they would use the paddles unless you just really wanted them to. But they charge extra for that, and they would notify you that of that in advance. And then, as you were leaving, they would say, okay, well, we will send you the bill, and great, okay. And then several weeks later, after you put the incident out of your mind and your hand is back to normal again, you will get an astronomical bill. And it will just be like, here, pay this very large dollar amount. And you'll be like, I didn't know it cost $20,000 to stitch up my hand. And you'll be like, something's not right here. And so then you call the billing department and you're on hold forever. And then they say, oh, well, you need to call the insurance company because they're actually the people that are the problem. Okay.
Yeah.
So then you call the insurance company and you wait online with them for a very long time. And then you finally talk to someone who says, no. And then you say, I need to speak to a supervisor. And then they give you to the supervisor. And then after you talk to the supervisor for a long time, you will have to escalate usually a few stages before you can finally kind of get what you need. And then they will cover more of the bill. And then, but the worst part is kind of the stress afterwards.
Mm.
Like after you get sent home from the hospital, a whole other process begins. And, if you are recovering, let's say you have cancer, for example, you're at home and you're sick and, you've had a procedure and now you're going through chemo and all these things. In between throwing up, you're going to be calling the insurance company to try to get them to do what you paid them to do. And
That's
that's the beauty of our system.
that's horrifying. That genuinely is. I'm trying to, and I know this is normally we like to present a comedy spin on things, but
Yeah.
I mean there is none here. It's just horror for me. I am genuinely wow. I am. I tell you what, for a country that has delights in the amount of Second Amendment guns it has,
Hmm.
I am surprised that it's taken this long for somebody to take out one of the CEOs of a healthcare company. I am surprised.
Yeah,
Um,
honestly, and I think now that the everybody that is a billionaire of some sort
mm,
is a little bit nervous right now because it's like, hey, you may be rich and powerful and have, this guy had a security
yeah,
team. It didn't do him any good. They weren't around him right that minute, but
that
you
guy's got
know,
a gun. Run! Yeah,
exactly. Like it's yeah, it is when you combine a overly gun focused culture
yeah.
with a complete lack of respect in the healthcare industry, this is what you get.
The other thing I wanted to ask about was there must be times when well, essentially had your life saved without your consent. What happens then? Because it's just turned around and said, I didn't ask you to do this. How come I'm paying for it? Do you still have to pay for it?
Yes,
Wow.
you do. Yeah. Yes.
They
So
get you either way, don't they?
if
Yeah.
if they if you fell and passed out and somebody
Yeah.
called an ambulance and you didn't make that decision, you are still on the hook for that ambulance and you have to go through a long process to figure out, what can be done about that.
And you mentioned, you said about 20,000 for the hand. Can you give us, without kind of going into much, obviously, to your medical history, can you give us some idea of what, say, let's say an ambulance, how much would calling an ambulance cost? I mean, no doubt it's different per state, but roughly.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's about I want to say $5,000. I take that with a grain of salt, but it's
Wow.
maybe 2,000.
Wow.
It's more than $1,000. I'll say that.
No wonder everybody gets in the taxi. Crikey. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't care how far away this hospital is.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Didn't cost $1,000.
You know what? I'll walk there.
Yeah.
Just
Okay.
let me
Honestly,
tie something around this bullet hole, and I'll just limp on over. I'll see you in a couple of hours.
if there's a shopping trolley on the way, I'll just, yeah. And it's
Exactly.
downhill. We'll be fine. We'll be fine.
Exactly.
All right. Well, that's all the time that we've got for this week. Thank you very much, everyone. We will actually now be taking a break until 2025. So I think from Andrea and myself, we're going to wish you a very Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year. After all that, yes, do take care.
Bye bye.